Bowery Farming, once valued at over $2 billion, gone. AppHarvest, bankrupt. Infarm, which had spread across a dozen countries, collapsed. At what point does an industry stop calling that a correction and start calling it a catastrophe?
That's the question everyone was asking around 2024, right? Trade journalists literally started keeping running tallies of the failures because they stopped being surprised. But here's what's actually interesting. The industry didn't die. What came out the other side is smaller, harder, and honestly a lot more real.
And that's what we're digging into today. We've been going through this breakdown of the top 10 vertical farming companies still standing in 2026, and there's a clear pattern in who made it. Jordan, you've been in this space long enough to have watched the boom and the bust firsthand. Were these failures predictable?
Painfully predictable, in hindsight. Almost every major collapse followed the same playbook. Expand fast, assume that scale will eventually solve your margin problem, and then run out of runway when it doesn't. The companies that survived generally did the exact opposite.
So let's get specific. What did the survivors actually do differently? Because they were more disciplined is the kind of thing that sounds obvious after the fact.
3 things stand out from the analysis. First, they got ruthlessly specific about which crops to grow, not just whatever leafy greens filled a rack, but crops where the premium pricing actually justifies the production cost. Second, they locked in retail partnerships before they built capacity, not after. And third, they treated energy cost as the existential variable it really is, not just a line item to optimize later.
That third point is interesting because energy is often the thing that gets glossed over in the pitch decks. Lighting alone in a vertical farm can eat 25 to 30% of your operating costs.
Exactly, and the companies that ignored that were essentially betting that electricity prices would stay low and that they'd figure out efficiency at scale. That bet did not pay off, but some operators actually turned the shakeout into an opportunity. When competitors started failing, distressed assets became available at a fraction of their original cost.
That counter-cyclical move is really striking when you look at a company like 80 Acres Farms. Walk me through what they did, because it's a pretty remarkable case study.
So 80 Acres is based in Hamilton, Ohio, and when Calera went bankrupt, they stepped in and acquired 3 fully built vertical farms in Georgia, Texas, and Colorado for a fraction of what those facilities cost to construct. They retrofitted them with their own automation system and turned stranded infrastructure into productive farms without bearing the full capital cost of new builds.
And then they merged with Solely Organic in August 2025, which brought something most vertical farms have always struggled to build on their own: distribution.
20,000 plus retail locations and decades of relationships. That's the piece that often gets underestimated. You can grow the most technically impressive lettuce in the world, but if you can't move it consistently at the right price point, none of it matters. The combined entity is now projecting close to $200 million in revenue in their first year together.
Let's talk about Oishii, because they represent a completely different strategic bet: premium strawberries with Japanese cultivation techniques. That feels almost counterintuitive when the industry narrative was always about democratizing access to fresh produce.
It's a really interesting contrast. Oishii basically said, "We're not going to compete on volume with field agriculture. We're going to own the ultra-premium tier where the economics actually work for indoor production." Their Amakase berry was selling for prices that would make most grocery shoppers do a double take, and people paid it.
And there's a real lesson there about market positioning. The companies that tried to undercut field-grown commodity crops on price, that's where the math falls apart fastest.
Right, because you're fighting an opponent with fundamentally lower cost structures. Sunshine is free. Land in Kansas is cheap. If your value proposition is just fresher lettuce for the same price, that's a very thin margin to operate on. The survivors either went up market, got hyperlocal, or found specific use cases where proximity and consistency are worth paying for.
So what's the broader takeaway here for anyone watching the vertical farming space? Whether you're an investor, an operator, or just someone who cares about where the food system is heading.
I think the takeaway is that vertical farming isn't dead. It just had to get honest about what it actually is. It's not a replacement for conventional agriculture at scale. It's a precision tool for specific crops, specific markets, and specific supply chain problems. The companies that understood that from the start are the ones writing the next chapter.
And the ones that survive the next 5 years will probably be the ones doubling down on that specificity, rather than trying to be everything to everyone.
Exactly. Less we're going to feed the world from a warehouse, and more we grow this crop, for this retailer, in this region, better than anyone else. That's a real business.
We've only scratched the surface here. The full breakdown covers all 10 companies, including some fascinating international operators and a few names that might surprise you. For the complete picture, the full article is worth your time.
Absolutely. Find the full article at Farming blog. It goes deep on each company's strategy, what they grow, how they're structured, and what the competitive landscape looks like heading into the back half of this decade.
If this episode gave you something to think about, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we genuinely appreciate a review. It helps other people in the industry find the show. We'll see you next time on Vertical Farming Insights.